Two children born on the same street. One grows up in a country where the lights come on, the roads connect the cities, and the hospitals have medicine. The other grows up in a place where the state has not meaningfully existed in the lives of ordinary people for 2 generations. The street is real. The island is Hispaniola. And the border between those 2 children is not a mountain range, not a river, not even a wall in any practical sense. It is something far harder to see and far more devastating to understand. This is not a story about poverty. Every island in the Caribbean has known poverty. This is not a story about colonialism. Every nation on this island was colonized, exploited, and left behind. This is a story about a single fork in the road. A moment where 2 countries with nearly identical starting conditions made different choices, or had different choices made for them, and how those choices compounded over 200 years into the widest income gap between 2 countries, sharing a land border anywhere on Earth. The gross domestic product per capita of the Dominican Republic today stands at approximately $10,000. Haiti's stands at roughly $1,600. Same soil, same rainfall, same Atlantic hurricanes. A gap of more than 6 to 1. We will trace the shared origin, find the exact point where the paths diverged, and walk both roads to the present. We will eliminate the explanations that don't hold, and we will isolate the one variable that does. If you are the kind of person who refuses to accept a clean answer to a messy question, you are already in the right place. The story of this island begins with a shared catastrophe. By the early 19th century, both halves of Hispaniola had been shaped by the same brutal engine: the Atlantic slave trade, sugar plantation economies, and French and Spanish colonial extraction. Saint-Domingue, the western third of the island under French control, was by 1780 the most profitable colony on Earth. It produced roughly 40% of Europe's sugar and more than half of its coffee. It ran on the labor of approximately 500,000 enslaved people, one of the densest concentrations of forced labor in human history. The eastern 2/3, under Spanish control, was comparatively neglected. Santo Domingo was a backwater. Its economy was pastoral, its population smaller, its exploitation less total. Both sides were defined by violence, extraction, and racial hierarchy. Both sides were largely cut off from the possibility of self-determination. Both sides entered the 19th century with shattered human capital, minimal infrastructure, and no institutional tradition of self-governance. If you were betting on which half would thrive in 1800, you would have no obvious reason to prefer either one. Does that surprise you? Most people assume the divergence began with slavery, with colonialism, with geography, but the evidence keeps pointing somewhere else. The Haitian Revolution, which ended in January of 1804, was the first and only successful slave rebellion in history to produce an independent nation. It was extraordinary. It was also immediately punished. France, the former colonial power, refused to recognize Haitian sovereignty unless Haiti agreed to compensate French slaveholders for their lost property, meaning the people who had been enslaved themselves. In 1825, under threat of a French naval blockade and potential re-invasion, Haiti's president, Jean-Pierre Boyer, agreed. The indemnity was 150 million francs. later renegotiated to 90 million, an amount equivalent to roughly $21 billion in today's terms. Haiti began borrowing from French banks to make the payments. The debt was not fully retired until 1947. 122 years of payments to the country that had enslaved its people. Think about that for a moment. Not morally, structurally. A nation born from revolution against exploitation was immediately locked into a financial instrument that redirected its public resources toward foreign creditors for over a century. Every road not built, every school not funded, every hospital not equipped during that period was competing against a debt payment that existed to compensate the perpetrators of the original crime. This is not a rhetorical point. This is a fiscal fact with a precise number attached to it. What was the Dominican Republic doing during those same years? Struggling, occupied at different points by Haiti itself, then by Spain again, then achieving its own independence in 1844. The Dominican path through the 19th century was not smooth. It involved political instability, foreign interventions, and its own share of debt. But it was not carrying the specific fiscal anchor that Haiti carried. The Dominican state, fragile as it was not legally obligated from birth to transfer its national income to a former colonial power. Here is the question that belongs in the comments. If your country had been forced to spend a century paying reparations to the people who had enslaved its founders, which institution do you believe would have survived intact? The 20th century is where the divergence accelerates, and where a second critical variable enters. The United States occupied both countries. It occupied Haiti from 1915 to 1934. It occupied the Dominican Republic from 1916 to 1924. Both occupations were motivated by strategic and financial interests, not by humanitarian concern. Both left behind road infrastructure, centralized institutions, and the suppression of local political development. The occupations were bad for both countries, but what came after them was not the same. In the Dominican Republic, the occupation was followed by the 31-year dictatorship of Rafael Trujillo, who seized power in 1930 and held it until his assassination in 1961. Trujillo was brutal. His regime was responsible for the massacre of an estimated 15,000 to 20,000 Haitian migrants in 1937, one of the most deliberate atrocities in the Western Hemisphere in the 20th century. His rule suppressed democratic development, concentrated wealth in his personal network, and deformed Dominican institutions for decades. This is not a success story in any moral sense. But Trujillo did one thing that would matter enormously in the decades that followed. He invested, for self-interested reasons, in building a physical state. Roads, bridges, ports, an industrial base controlled by his family. Yes, but an industrial base. Hospitals, because a dictator needs a population healthy enough to work. The Dominican Republic, emerging from Trujillo's assassination in '61, had a functioning, if deformed, institutional skeleton. It had a bureaucracy, damaged and corrupt, but present. It had a physical infrastructure. It had a financial system of sorts. Haiti, in the same period, had François Duvalier, who took power in 1957, and whose son, Jean-Claude, held it until 1986. The Duvalier regime did not build, it extracted. The Tonton Macoutes Duvalier's paramilitary force, were not soldiers of a state. They were agents of personal power, financed by foreign aid, primarily from the United States, which supported the regime as a bulwark against Cuban communist influence. The Haitian state under the Duvaliers was not deformed, it was deliberately hollowed. Institutions that might challenge personal power were dismantled. The professional class, doctors, engineers, administrators, fled by the tens of thousands in what became one of the most severe brain drains in the Caribbean's history. By the time Jean-Claude Duvalier fled the country in a United States Air Force plane in 1986, Haiti did not have a broken state. It had almost no state at all. This is the variable, not race, not geography, not colonial origin, because both were colonized, not proximity to the United States, because both were occupied by it. The variable is the institutional skeleton, or the absence of one. The Dominican Republic, for all its violence and corruption, emerged from its dictatorship with a state that could be reformed. Haiti emerged from its dictatorship with a void, and into that void, every subsequent shock fell without absorption. In January of 2010, a magnitude 7 earthquake struck just west of Port-au-Prince. The death toll estimates range from 100,000 to 300,000 people. The figure is uncertain because the Haitian state lacked the capacity to count its own dead with precision. The physical destruction was catastrophic, but comparable earthquakes in countries with functioning building codes, emergency response systems, and institutional capacity have killed hundreds, not hundreds of thousands. The earthquake did not destroy Haiti. It revealed the depth of what was already absent. Buildings without codes, a capital without functional emergency services, a government without the data infrastructure to direct international aid. More than $13 billion in international relief and reconstruction pledges followed. A decade later, independent assessments found that much of that money had not reached its intended purpose, not because of a single point of corruption, but because there was no institutional channel capable of receiving and deploying it at scale. Meanwhile, 40 kilometers east, in the Dominican city of Santiago de los Caballeros, the population was growing. A new free trade zone was opening its third factory extension, and remittances from Dominicans abroad were being deposited into a banking system with functioning regulations. Marina Solis is a composite drawn from documented accounts of Dominican garment workers in the early 2000s. She earns wages that are low by any global standard. Her neighborhood floods during hurricane season, the hospital is overcrowded, but the lights come on. Her daughter attends a school that has a teacher 5 days a week, and when she deposits her wages, the money is there the next morning. These are not achievements, they are baselines. But they are baselines Haiti cannot reliably provide. Jean Robert, a name drawn from the most common Haitian male names and a profile consistent with documented testimonies from internally displaced persons after 2010, sells charcoal in a market outside Port-au-Prince. The trees around him are gone. Haiti has lost approximately 98% of its original forest cover, compared to roughly 40% in the Dominican Republic. The deforestation is visible from space. A satellite image of the island shows a clear line where the trees stop and the bare hillsides begin, a line that follows the border almost exactly. The deforestation in Haiti is not a natural phenomenon. It is the outcome of a population burning wood for fuel because there is no electrical grid that reaches them, because there is no institutional framework to manage land use, because the state that might have built those systems was systematically dismantled over decades. Would you look at that satellite image and see a natural disaster? Or would you see the physical shadow of institutional collapse? By 2023, Haiti had effectively ceased to function as a state in the Weberian sense of holding a monopoly on the use of force within its territory. Gang coalitions controlled an estimated 80% of Port-au-Prince. The National Police Force had approximately 9,000 active officers for a population of over 11 million people. The Prime Minister was operating from abroad. Elections had not been held in years because no institution existed with the security capacity to run them. The country was not failing. It had passed the threshold where the word failing still applies. The Dominican Republic in the same year was preparing to host international investors at a tourism summit in Punta Cana, the coastal resort region that now draws more than 8 million visitors annually and generates revenues that the Dominican government uses to fund, among other things, conditional cash transfer programs for its poorest citizens. The same island, the same hurricanes, the same colonial history, the same United States occupation. What was different? The institutional skeleton. The presence or absence of a state capable of absorbing shocks, channeling investment, and providing the baseline conditions under which a market economy can function. Without those conditions, trade doesn't work, credit doesn't flow, and investment doesn't come. And without investment, the compounding begins to run in reverse. This is what makes the Haitian case not an anomaly, but a warning. The Dominican Republic is not rich. Its inequality remains severe. Its institutions are fragile. Corruption is present at every level, but it has, for now, enough state to hold. Haiti demonstrates what happens when that threshold is crossed, when institutions don't just weaken, but disappear. The process doesn't announce itself. It accumulates quietly across decades, through each debt payment, each hollowed ministry, each professional who boards a flight and does not come back. And here is the question that remains after the video ends. How much institutional erosion can a state absorb before it crosses that threshold? Not in Haiti, not in the Dominican Republic, in your own country. The lights still come on. The money is still in the account. But the question is not whether the system is working today. The question is whether anyone is paying the debt. If this analysis changed how you see the island you thought you knew, share it with someone who is still looking for a simple explanation. Subscribe and turn on the notifications to join the community of people who follow the trajectory before the headlines catch up. And leave your answer in the comments. Which side of the fork do you believe your own country is on right now? The content of this video is based on strategic analysis reports, estimated data, and hypothetical scenarios regarding the economic and geopolitical context. The information is offered for reference, independent analysis, and documentary storytelling purposes. It does not constitute financial, legal, or investment advice. The images and materials used serve to illustrate the arguments.